Hello and welcome to Brescia's Money Matters workshop. Thank you for selecting this link. My name is Rachel Bruins and I am Brescia's Financial Aid Officer. Throughout this presentation, we will explore the cost of post-secondary studies, as well as options that students can explore to help finance those post-secondary studies. So in front of you on this screen are four numbers just flashing before you. These represent the estimated costs of post-secondary studies. $6,000 is the average cost of tuition to attend university studies. $1,500 is the average cost of ancillary fees. These are mandatory fees that all students pay, so that can include health and dental plan, bus pass, student organization fees, etc. $13,000 is a rough estimate of the cost for a student to live in residence, and $20,000 is the average cost per year for a student to attend post-secondary. Multiply that by 4 years of an undergraduate degree, and it starts to really add up. Now, again, these are estimates. However, for a student that is living at home, you can expect the cost of your tuition, the cost of those ancillary or mandatory fees, and then those costs that you have associated with living at home. So are your parents charging you rent? Will you be eating out on campus so many days a week? Do you have a car? Are you paying for a parking pass, etc.? Students who are choosing to live in residence or off campus, those are other costs that you have associated. So while it seems that living away from home is a little bit more expensive, it's important that you budget accordingly so that you can stretch out the resources that you have to help support you for those 8 months of school. So unlike this cartoon that you see before you, money does not grow on trees. So it's very important for students to consider what resources that they can tap into to help support that post-secondary education. This is probably one of the biggest financial undertakings you'll take, aside from buying a home. So it is important to think ahead and plan out how you are going to make this happen. This is a resource provided from the Government of Canada. So if you go onto the Government of Canada website, they have some really great resources specifically targeted to students and educational costs, such as budgeting tools and other resources. So I certainly suggest that you check that out. But one of the things you want to look at is, what are your costs? So that's the column on the right-hand side. So that's where we already discussed tuition fees, your ancillary fees or student fees. You'll have book costs on top of that. And where will you be living for the academic year? Once you have an idea of what that's going to cost you, your next step is to figure out what resources you have to help support those costs. Have your parents set up an RESP for you, an education savings plan. Now might be a great time to have that discussion with your family. Will you be working while you're attending studies, or solely focusing on your studies for the fall winter term and then finding employment in the summer only? Do you have the grades to support any scholarships? Can you apply for any awards or bursaries, as well as a government student loan or a student line of credit? So these are all examples of resources that students can explore to help support those post-secondary studies. The Ontario Student Assistance Program, or OSAP, is the main source of funding for a large population of post-secondary students. This is the major way that most students can support their post-secondary studies. So these are just some brief facts that not everyone is aware of. When a student applies for OSAP, you will receive a funding summary. So the total funding that you're eligible to receive for that specific academic year. That funding is comprised of loans and grants. The loans are the portion that you need to repay. So that's the debt that you'll have by the time you finish your post-secondary studies. But the grants are free. That's money that you never have to pay back. Students have the option to accept only the grant funding and not the loan. So it's a really great idea to fill out an OSAP application, see what you're entitled to, and then you can make a decision. Do you need to take on the loan and the grant because perhaps your costs are high and you don't have other resources to support you? Or do you have support, other support that you would allow you to only accept the grant funding, the money that you don't have to pay back? So it is worthwhile for all students to fill out an OSAP application because you won't know how much you're entitled to until you fill out that application. The loans are interest-free the entire time that you are studying and for 6 months after you graduate. So once you graduate studies, you enter a grace period, that period of 6 months where no payment is required. Once that 6 months end, that's when your minimum monthly payments will start. There are programs in place to help students who are not able to make those monthly payments when they once they get out of school. So that's the repayment assistance program. And there is support from the government to help reduce that debt load by the time that you graduate. So when you are looking to apply for OSAP consideration, it is important to remember that attending post-secondary studies is a shared responsibility between the government, the student, and their family. So when you're applying to OSAP, it does not necessarily cover all your costs. The government, both federal and provincial, expect that the student will contribute to their post-secondary studies as well as their parents. So when you are applying for OSAP consideration, they do take into consideration the cost of your program, the cost of those ancillary fees, where you will be living. Are you living at home or are you living away from home? How many people are in your family? How many children are your parents currently supporting through post-secondary studies? And what is that parental income? So there are many different factors taken into consideration when the OSAP assessment is completed. One thing that you can do now is go onto Google and type in OSAP aid estimator. This is a great way for students to get an idea or an estimate of roughly how much OSAP they may be eligible to receive prior to filling out an application. Again, it's just an estimator tool, so it is still worth filling out the overall application. But the OSAP aid estimator will give you that rough idea so that you can start putting that budget together and determining if you also need to explore other resources as a way to help fund the remaining or the shortfall. The OSAP application is generally released in the spring of every year. So that is typically in May. Students are encouraged to apply as early as possible, and most institutions encourage applications to be submitted by the end of June. The reason for this is that it allows institutions ample time to process your application. It can take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to process OSAP applications. So it is advisable for you to apply early so that the funding can be in place and ready to go by the time that your studies start. If you are applying for university through the Ontario University Application Centre, or OUAC, you are able to link your OUAC profile with your OSAP account. So when you go onto the OSAP website and you create your profile or register your account for the first time, there is an option for students to link their OSAP application or their OSAP account with their OUAC account. What this does is it allows OSAP to pre-populate a large majority of your information. So first and last name, email, home address, and then that information is pre-populated. You also have the option of skipping that step and not linking your applications, and the application is again will still proceed. You just have to type in those details that may have been pre-populated for you. Once your OSAP application is submitted, funding is released in 2 installments. So students will receive roughly 60% of the funding entitlement in September, and then 40% of the funding entitlement in January. So it's dispersed in those 2 installments. And once you have that funding summary and you can see how much funding you're eligible to receive for each of those disbursement periods, that's where you can start to plan out, okay, I've got this much money, so much is needed for my tuition, my books, and first month and last month rent, for example. What's left over and how am I going to stretch that out? So it does provide you with that information so you can start planning that out prior to your studies starting. To submit an OSAP application is fairly straightforward. So you go on to the Ontario website, ontario.ca/OSAP. If you are a new user, you're going to register for the first time. Here you will create an OSAP profile and you will choose a password. So you'll automatically be given an OSAP access number, an OAN number, and you will determine your password. The OAN and the password are needed every time you log in the future. So it is very important that you write this down somewhere secure and somewhere where you will be able to find it, because if you ever forget this information, you will have to go through a number of steps to reset that information. So once you've registered an account, you can select the type of application that you're going to complete. There is a part-time OSAP application, a full-time OSAP application, and then we now have micro-credentials. Once you select the application, and for the majority of students, that's usually a full-time OSAP application, you'll move through the steps. The nice thing is that with the application, you can save and exit. So if you're ever unsure of information, you can always save what you've completed, exit out, ask the financial aid officer, or talk to your parents if it's their income information that you need, and then log back in and complete that application. Once the application has been submitted, you will be provided with a list of required supporting documentation. This will include student signature pages, parental signature pages, depending on your situation, and the Master Student Financial Assistance Agreement, the MSFAA, which is your lifetime loan agreement. This documentation should be uploaded directly to your OSAP account. So when you once you've submitted your application, you'll have it like a summary screen. It will provide you with a list of required documents. You will have a link to open up that document, print it, sign it, and then you're going to scan and upload it back to your OSAP account. That is the fastest and most efficient way for students to submit those documentations. If for any reason you are not able to submit by uploading electronically, students can mail in the documentation, but there are generally more delays with mailed in documents. Once that has all been completed, you will then receive updates with any changes to your application. So when the documents are processed, you'll see that there's no new, when you log in, you won't see any required documents now listed under your application. Once those documents are processed, generally you'll have an assessment that occurs later in the summer that will provide you with that summary of how much funding you're entitled to for the upcoming academic year. I mentioned that one of the documents that needs to be completed is the Master's Student Financial Assistance Agreement. So this is a document that needs to be completed by all students. However, once you complete it once, you don't need to complete it again unless you take time off during your studies. So the MSFAA is your lifetime student loan agreement. It is completed electronically through the National Student Loan Service Center portal. So the NSLSC portal. When you are on the National Student Loan Service Center portal, you will link your banking information. So you'll provide your banking information. You'll have to answer a number of, you'll create challenge questions for yourself, and you'll create a profile with the National Student Loan Service Center. The National Student Loan Service Center is actually responsible for administering or for releasing the funding to students. So the MSFAA is completed through that National Student Loan Service Center portal, and that's how the funding is dispersed. So you'll provide your banking information, and it will come from the National Student Loan Service Center account. When it comes time that you have completed your post-secondary studies and it comes time to you now having to repay your loans, that will occur through the National Student Loan Service Center. So creating this account with the National Student Loan Service Center will allow you to keep track of your overall debt load. You'll be able to see what your minimum monthly payments would look like, when those would start. And they have a number of resources available to students as well, videos, etc. Just on preparing you for that time when you will have to start repaying your loan. Another thing that is important to consider or to keep in mind when you're applying for OSAP is that there are some special circumstances, for example, that they will take into consideration. So for example, a student who is living in London, Ontario, or whose parents are living in London, but the student chooses to live in Brescia's residence building for the first year, they are not automatically assessed for living costs. The OSAP application will assume that because your parents live within 30 kilometers of the institution, you're living at home. So you need to complete an adjust living allowance review. This will allow OSAP to recognize that, well, no, you're not living at home, you're choosing to live in residence, so that you can be assessed for living costs. And that will make a huge difference with your funding entitlement. There are some students who commute from their home to their institution. So in circumstances where there's no direct bus route that connects you to the institution, or you're driving, you have these additional travel costs, there's a review for that. There are some students whose parents, or maybe it's just one parent, has experienced a change in their income. There's an estimated parental income review. So for example, if in the prior year, so when you're submitting an OSAP application, you'll be required to provide income information from the prior year. If that income information is different from what the current situation is, that's where a student could submit an appeal. So perhaps in the last, taxation year, a parent was working full-time, had a great income. That's what OSAP is going to be looking at. But perhaps now, when the student is starting studies, that parent actually retired. So their income is going to be a lot different from what it was the prior year. That would be a great example of where we want to look at the estimated parental income, because that is a better example of that family's current financial situation. Perhaps you received a severance package, maybe one parent passed away. So those are the types of things that would consider. Students who have a permanent disability can also include that on their OSAP profile, and you'll be required to submit documentation that supports that that a medical professional will complete. But that permanent disability documentation will allow you to be considered for a permanent disability grant. So again, the grant is free money that you don't have to pay back. So these are just some things to consider when you are applying for OSAP. If you feel that your OSAP funding summary isn't a reflection of what you thought perhaps you might receive, that's where it's a great time for you to speak to the financial aid officer at your institution, because they can review your application with you and ask those questions, because perhaps there is something that OSAP isn't considering in that initial application, but there's a review or an appeal that will then allow you to be considered for additional funding. So it's great that these options are available. However, your students aren't necessarily made aware of them. So that's where that's where we want you to connect with the financial aid officer so that we can review that application with you. So OSAP is the main source of financial aid for most students attending post-secondary studies. On the other side, you can explore the funding opportunities available through your institution. So that can include entrance scholarships and awards, bursary programs, work-study programs, on-campus employment, and emergency funding. The remainder of this presentation will focus on the first three. I will just point out that for the last two, on-campus employment, there are many opportunities for students to look for employment opportunities directly on their campus. Often this can be in the campus recreation facilities. This could be working in food services, so at the many different food vendors available throughout the campuses. So most of that information is found on your institution's website, and it's a great idea to explore that because there's convenience in being able to work right on campus. The other thing I wanted to quickly point out is emergency funding. So oftentimes students will find themselves in a financial crisis at some point during the academic year. So this is where, if something like that occurs to you, it's very important that you reach out to the financial aid office at your school so that we can help support you. If the student doesn't reach out, then we're not necessarily aware of what it is that they're experiencing. Financial stress is linked to your mental health. So if you are experiencing financial stress, oftentimes that correlates with how you're progressing in your studies. Are you able to focus on studying? Are you able to write those tests and exams? And so you want to make sure that your financial well-being is at a good point. So if ever you have a financial crisis that arises during the academic year, please reach out to your financial aid officer so they can explore ways that they can help support you so that you are able to complete your studies and have that stress kind of put at ease. So Brescia entrance scholarships. So when a student is applying to Brescia University College, you are automatically assessed for an entrance scholarship. Entrance scholarships are automatic. They are based on your final admission average from your high school. One thing I always like to point out with students is that Brescia entrance scholarships have the potential to renew for all your years of study. So 4 years of your post-secondary degree. That is something that you want to consider when you're looking at other institutions. Our scholarships are also very generous. So with an 82% admission average and above, you're automatically going to receive an entrance scholarship. The higher your average, the more money you're eligible to receive. So at 82, so you can see on this chart here, a student with an 82% average will receive $1,500, 85%, $2,500, and it just keeps going up. So to be eligible for the renewal, let's say your student comes in with a 92% admission average, that is a $3,500 scholarship. At the end of your academic year at Brescia, so at the end of your first year, you just need to maintain a minimum 80% average, and you will continue to receive the $3,500 entrance scholarship that you started with. So you don't need to maintain that 92%. All of these scholarships are renewable as long as the student maintains a minimum 80% on the 5.0 courses from first year. And then that can be each progressing academic year. And that is something that is possible. We have many students at Brescia that actually retain these entrance scholarships through all 4 years of studies. And that can significantly help to decrease the cost of your tuition. So I mentioned that the average cost of tuition is around $6,000. If you receive a $4,000 entrance scholarship, that's a huge chunk off of that tuition amount that you needed to pay. So that's less of a burden. So this is something that's posted on the Brescia's website. So if you go to our admissions page at brescia.uwo.ca, you can find this information as a resource. Another thing that Brescia is able to do for our first year entering students is provide program-based awards. So depending on the program that you are interested in, many students are able to obtain a program-based award on top of their entrance scholarship. So for example, if you're a student who's interested in our foods and nutrition program, you've applied, you will receive a $1,000 program-based award on top of your entrance scholarship. So again, if you had that 92% average, that was a $3,500 scholarship. Tack on the foods and nutrition program-based award for $1,000. Now you have $4,500 that will be applied to your Brescia statement of account and decrease the balance that you have owing. So these program-based awards are automatic. They come with your offer of admission. As I said, they can be held in conjunction with your Brescia entrance scholarship. So that is something to definitely keep in mind when you're exploring other institutions. Look at how much scholarship or award support you're eligible to receive for that first year that you're attending. And again, this information can be found on Brescia's admission webpage under our Money Matters page. We are also able to provide some other special automatic awards. So the first is our Specialist High Skills Major or SHSM Entrance Award. This is an automatic award for students who have completed a SHSM program. It's $2,000 with that minimum 82% admission average. And can be held in conjunction with a Brescia entrance scholarship. So again, you have that 92% admission average. That's a $3,500 scholarship. If you did a SHISM program in high school, that's another $2,000. And then you can also receive that program-based award on top of that, depending on the program that you're applying to at Brescia. So all of these things together can really add up to great financial support for your first year at Brescia. With the SHISM award, it is important for students to connect with our admissions office at Brescia to make us aware. So you do need to self-declare that you completed a SHISM program so that we can take that into consideration. That is the one special piece to note with that SHISM award. And again, more information can be found on our Brescia website about that. We also have the Liz Hewitt Arts and Humanities Award. There are 2 of these awards valued at $2,500 each and are designed for students who are attending an arts and humanities program. The first award is given out to the student with the highest admission average and who isn't receiving one of those top scholarships, the full academic tuition scholarship. The second award is given out to a student with a minimum 85% entrance average and who also demonstrates financial need. So this award is generally determined right before the start of the academic year, because at that point we'll have all final grade information from students. So this is again, it's automatic. It can be held with a Brescia entrance scholarship, but it is determined later in the year once we have that full list of our first year incoming class and those final grades in. Okay, so you've explored the scholarship information, and those scholarships and awards, the program-based awards, are automatic. You can view all of that information on our Brescia website, brescia.uwo.ca, Money Matters tab, and then there's a Scholarships and Awards tab. Once you've explored the scholarships at Brescia, then I would encourage you to look at the other scholarships and awards that are available to students across Canada. Those would include the scholarshipscanada.com website and the wyconic.com website. So these are two websites that house a huge inventory of all the scholarships and awards that are out there and available. So these could be from companies and organizations, special donors, anything really, and it's all housed under these websites. So students can create an account, type in, here's the program that I'm interested in, here's my rough average that I have coming out of high school, and it will populate all the scholarships and awards that you may be eligible to apply for. The big thing to note is that there are thousands of dollars out there, and so much of it goes unawarded every year. So it really is great for you to explore those opportunities out there. It will take some time to complete, but if you start early, you're just preparing yourself so much more and setting yourself up for success for the start of those post-secondary studies. So I highly encourage you to see what's out there and apply. You can also look at whether or not your parents' place of work offers scholarships and awards. Do you have a part-time job on the side at McDonald's or Tim Hortons or somewhere? And do they have a scholarship or award program for students? So you won't know until you ask or until you explore those options. Okay, so we have those automatic awards that I mentioned earlier with the Brescia entrance scholarships and the program-based awards, the SHISM award. We also have some wonderful award opportunities for students, but they do require an application. So the first is the Brescia Community a Leader Award. This is a $1,000 award that students can apply for consideration. So the application for the Brescia Community Leader Award is available on our Brescia website. You can also find it in your view book for those of you that have one. You'll complete the Community Leader Award application. You will be required to provide at least one letter of reference, and then you're going to write a brief essay explaining how you have contributed to your community and what skills you've learned from that opportunity. So most of us have to complete so many hours of community service in order to graduate high school. Some of you may be volunteering through a church or with an athletic group. And those are the opportunities, or those are the experiences that we want to hear about in that application. So most of you are already volunteering or have at some point. Please consider filling out this application for the Brescia Community Leader Award. We have 6 awards available. 4 are to first-year incoming students, domestic, and 2 are for our international entrance students. So there are 4 of those, well, 6 total Community Leader Awards, each valued at $1,000, and it can be held in conjunction with your Brescia entrance scholarships. So again, this is an extra amount, and it's certainly worth applying for. The Brescia Lead Excellence Award is valued at $5,000 and is for, there's 1 award available for a domestic or an international student incoming to Brescia. So that first year student coming in. Again, the application can be found on Brescia's website, brescia.uwo.ca. You can just type it in the search. You'll complete the application form. You will be required to provide a minimum of 2 letters of reference, and you will write a brief essay outlining your leadership roles and explaining how that leadership opportunity has what skills you've learned and how you've contributed to that to your school or your community in that leadership role. So if you're involved in your student council at school, perhaps you've been involved in leadership camps or other opportunities in the community, we want to hear about it. So please, again, consider taking the time to complete this application. It's $5,000, and again, it can be held in conjunction with those Brescia entrance scholarships and program-based awards. So this is a great opportunity for students to just take a few minutes to sit down and complete the application. Okay, so once you're at Brescia, we also have a very wonderful bursary and work study program. So bursaries are free money. You don't ever have to pay it back. However, it is based on financial need. So a bursary is meant to supplement, but not replace a student's other resources. Have you applied for OSAP consideration? Is there a shortfall between what OSAP is providing and what your costs are? The application for bursary consideration will be found on the Brescia website on the Money Matters tab. The bursary application typically gets released in the late summer every academic year, and then it remains available until the end of the academic year. It is certainly worth filling out an application. You never know until you fill that application out. Are you living in Brescia's residence? We recognize that residence is, a little bit more expensive. So that's a great reason alone to submit a bursary application. Are there special circumstances going on that perhaps OSAP doesn't take into consideration that you want to make me aware of on your bursary application? Perhaps it's just, that little bit extra that would go a long way to help purchase books or that new laptop that perhaps you need. So it's certainly a great idea to take a look at the bursary application. It does not take long to fill out. Generally, you're providing your personal information and then completing almost a budget. I'm looking to see what your resources are, what your expenses are, and then any other special circumstances, as I mentioned, that you want to make me aware of. Bursaries are awarded on an ongoing basis throughout the academic year. Students will be notified by their Western email account. And I send out reminders to students throughout the academic year about all these financial opportunities that are available in my monthly financial reminder newsletter. So certainly watch for that when you start at Brescia. The other opportunity that many campuses have, including Brescia, is a work-study program. The work-study program is an opportunity for students to work on campus while they're studying. Again, this program is based on financial need. There is a certain budget that we have to work with each academic year and so many positions. So with the work-study program, there are many students that would qualify for the program, but unfortunately not everyone can be approved. This is a great opportunity to keep in mind though, because it gives you those skills that you can take on to the workforce after you graduate. So the types of positions will vary. We have students working alongside our faculty and staff at Brescia. So with our faculty positions, those are often assisting those faculty members with research projects that they have going on. Our positions working alongside our staff at Brescia can vary. So that could be working in the Beryl Ivy Library, assisting with stacks maintenance and other opportunities within the library. It could involve working with our international program coordinator. We have various positions, they change every year, but those positions are posted on the Brescia website. The application for work study is made available in, I would say, mid-August. The application is due in mid-August every year for the start of the fall-winter program. We also have a summer work study program. Applications for that program are due in mid-April for the start of the May work study program. So the work study program does have a set deadline in order to be considered.